you.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Man, so Miss Lisa Watson, thank you for joining me on the good old Black Report. And as I like to always say, or as I told you before, I definitely see myself as an educator. And I want this conversation that you and I have to be one of those instruments or tools that I can use to educate and expose people to to different ideas and understandings, especially as they relate to reform in the Black community or progress in the Black community, and just the American culture in general. I think that you are an excellent person to have a conversation with. Miss Mary Byrne told me about you, and of course, since we had that first conversation, my mind has just been blown, through your experiences. So thank you for joining me. And if you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourself a little bit and tell people why you want to, to have this conversation with me and what it is that you're trying to achieve yourself.
Okay, well, thanks, Duran. Thanks for having me. And yes, shout out to Mary. I spoke with her this Friday. She spoke on my podcast. And I want to give a shout out to my podcast, and it's
Right,
called
right.
Out. Schools Out with Lisa Watson. I'm being sponsored by the Herzog Foundation. And so my focus, my primary drive right now in life is school choice. I see that as a vehicle for America to return to its best self and for a unique vehicle, a unique opportunity for the Black community to build wealth, power, and infrastructure. So if those are our goals, and I like to throw out my favorite Malcolm X quote. Malcolm X said that only a fool would allow his enemy to educate his children. I want that to sink in. Are you allowing your enemy to educate your children? Now, I'm not here to define your enemy. You define it for yourself. But there are certain groups of people that it doesn't make sense for you to allow the opposite group to educate your children. For example, if you're a Christian, are you allowing atheists to educate your children? I guarantee you, atheists will not wake up and allow Christians. They don't wake up and drop their kids off at Sunday school. Why not? So if you are allowing people who have the opposite polar belief system to educate your children, you are now transforming your children into your enemy.
Miss Lisa, let me ask you this because I mean, I've heard of school choice, but I really would like for you to break that down. What does school choice mean? Why do you think it is such a controversial position in the first place? And how did you come to your understanding of our belief that school choice is such a important vehicle for not just Black folks but America in general?
Okay, so let's do a backup. Things will make sense in a context. Because when we initially spoke, we shared a lot about our background, where we
Yeah.
started, and how we arrived where we are today. So my background is probably similar to yours. I'm Midwestern, just like you. I grew up in the city,
What city?
I Kansas City, Kansas.
Oh, Kansas City, Kansas. That's right. That's right.
Kansas, but in the metro. My divorced mom and 4 children, so not economically wealthy. I went to college. I ended up moving to Los Angeles to go to college, so that was somewhat pivotal because it was even though we're obviously all American, it was a cultural shift. It was different. And while I was there, I got exposed to ideas that I really wasn't familiar with. Um, Here, everyone sort of thought similarly, and we grew up in the church. I found out later I was what was called a cultural Christian, but it was still in the culture. And there, I got exposed to a lot of unbelief and atheism, and it shifted my mindset. Um, and I went into a lot of doubt and confusion about just the nature of the universe, the nature of creation. Is this real? Is this Bible real? And I started to go, I went into unbelief. Next thing you know, I was on a very liberal conveyor belt. I ended up moving back to Kansas City. I ended up graduating from UMKC, and I ended up um, my senior year. I needed an internship, and I ended up interning at Planned Parenthood. So again, I'm exposed to now. This is a new philosophy I'm being immersed in, and we know that philosophy is feminism. So let's keep tracking. I'm in unbelief. Now I'm immersed in a philosophy, feminism. I end up getting a job. I'm working for the telecom industry, and I end up becoming a union steward. So again, without knowing it, you're becoming immersed in philosophies, and a lot of the union philosophy borders on socialism. So now I'm unbelieving, feminist, mildly socialist. Then I end up, again, I zigzagged a bit. I end up moving back to Los Angeles. I'm there for a few years. Then I moved back to Kansas City again. When I moved back to Kansas City, I get an introduction by one of my best friends. He introduces me to his neighbor because they're having a big party. They live in a really nice, gorgeous neighborhood in Kansas City, and I had my favorite house in his neighborhood. He knew that. I'd always point that house out, and he said, "Hey, the people at your favorite house are having a big New Year's Eve party. We're gonna go." Okay. When I meet the lady who owns the house, it turns out she's the president of the ACLU. So we hit it off. She says, "You should join our board." So now I joined their board. Over the course of about 8 years, I have various roles with the organization. I'm the affirmative action officer. I co-found the Racial Justice Task Force. I become the president of the local chapter, and then I end up on the national board in New York City. So my liberalism is very deep. And then I had a supernatural experience. And then it sends me on a journey, and I start investigating evidence for God. The scripture that says, "Seek and you will find," manifests all throughout my life. I start finding that I'm being lied to. I'm looking into evolution. I'm looking into apologetics, which I had never heard of before, but that is the evidence for Christianity, and specifically evidence for Christianity. I'm being exposed to astronomy. I'm being exposed to genetics. I'm being exposed to intelligent design. All of these um, genres that have all of this evidence that says that the universe cannot create itself. For example, intelligence cannot create itself. Everything we ever look at in life, if you look at the screen that we're talking on right now, you can tell that an intelligence had to create what we're using. It couldn't spontaneously create itself from an explosion. So I end up coming out of everything, every philosophy that I was having, all of the wrong thinking. And that's sort of where I end up at the school choice movement. Now, there's a lot more, but the most I can summarize in about 5 minutes. I end up
No,
getting
that's
dropped
not
off.
bad.
I get
So,
dropped
so
off
it's
by the Lord. I get dropped off in the school choice movement, that this is where I'm supposed to be. This is the space I'm supposed to be working in. So now I'm trying to apply myself to understanding, why is this important? And you see all over the scriptures where the Lord is telling people, like, education is important and you're supposed to be trained up in a certain way. So are we doing that? Are we training people up in a certain way? And the answer is no. When you look back now just at the education movement in general in America, and it's a 400-year model, and it's in the last century is when it got really sort of perfected and made more like a science. But it's 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 just littered with errors right now. Littered. Like, for example, simple things like, just one generation ago, they used to train people on the trades. Why would you stop doing that? Why would you stop teaching mechanics? Why would you stop teaching home economics? It's very deliberate, the changes that have been made, and they are creating a disaster. So It's a one size fits all model. Why? Why? So seeing everything and how it's not working just reinforced my idea. Hey, we need options. If you see someone at their job and they have an 82% failure rate, would you keep hiring this person? So right now, specifically in the Black community, we have 82%. This number was for fourth graders, but for Black students, fourth grade, 82% illiteracy rate. Your number one job would
What
be to
you said,
82%.
82%
Yes,
is
yes,
the illiteracy rate
yes.
for
Not on
Black.
grade level. What they call it is grade level. So
Right.
82% not on grade level.
Not on grade level.
Right. So if that's your number one job, if I just hire you and say I need you to paint my house, and 82% of the time that I hire you, you don't meet the standard, why would I continue to hire you? I
Mm,
just probably wouldn't. No one would. You wouldn't continue to work with your hairdresser if 82% of the time you went there, you weren't satisfied. If you went to your mechanic and 82% of the time you went there, you weren't satisfied. You went to your doctor, your lawyer, your grocery store. It's just not how markets work. So
mm,
there's an artificial market that all artificial markets, all government markets rely on one thing, and that's force. If they can force you to do it, they don't have to perform. But see, your doctor can't force you to keep coming there because you can go choose another doctor. Your mechanic can't force you to go there because you can choose another mechanic.
mm.
I mean, at this point in life, your spouse, your husband and wife can't force you to stay there. We used to have that model. Scripture says, you're married for life, but
Right.
now you can come and go. So anytime you can come and go and you're not satisfied, you go. But if I can make up these zip code maps and force you into this marketplace,
Mm,
then you don't have any other option. So it's become political, but it shouldn't be political because it's just how markets work. So school choice disrupts markets. And that's why people are against it. If you had an automatic market, and I don't know what business you were in, but if you had a grocery store where everybody in this area was required to go to your grocery store, and 90%, you had 90% of the market that went to your grocery store, and you just don't have a clean grocery store, but you have no motivation to change it because you still are going to get the same market share no matter what. You are not going to support grocery choice. You're going to put money and energy and effort into maintaining your current system. So that hopefully makes sense across the board to anybody. There's no Black people in America that are sane, that should be saying that this is working for us. So now when we tie that to, hey, Malcolm said only a fool would allow his enemy to educate his children. So now we got foolishness. Now we have enemies educating our children. And now we have 82% not on grade level. Why wouldn't we support? Now, Black America has the highest level of support for school choice because
mm.
we're the most negative impact. So it's
How do
political now, but it shouldn't be. But if it is, I don't care. I'll ride the political horse. I'll ride the non-political horse. I will stand up at any forum and say, this is the issue for us. This is the civil rights issue for the 21st century. If you care about what's going to happen in the Black community, nothing is going to be fixed if people can't read. So don't complain about anything. If you wake up every day and you tell me everything is racism, that's one thing I don't really ride that everything is racism issue. But this one I will. The government schools have a history in America of racism. There were literally anti-literacy laws. There's everybody should know that. Laws saying if you teach someone that's Black to read and write, you're breaking the law. So is
Right.
anybody denying that? The same people that don't support school choice, they'll believe that. Are you telling me that this law wasn't on the books in Alabama? This law wasn't on the books in Missouri? This law wasn't on the books in Alabama? Tell me, when did it change? What day? What year? We're still operating under that paradigm where Educating Black children is not a priority. Then I arrived at another idea. Why is it their job? Whose job is it? It's your job. It's your job to make sure your children get educated. So we're failing in that area too. We're just littered with failure at this point. So accountability can happen across the board. As I dug into school choice more, I realized this is a vehicle to own and control an institution. So when you look again at our ancestors, we don't have to go far back. We can go back to Malcolm. We can go back to Reverend Cleage. I don't know if you've heard him about him. I had never
No.
heard of him. I found him online. And this was from the 1970s. And he was what he called himself a Black Christian nationalist. I never heard of that before. I like that term. I said,
A
well,
black Christian nationalist.
that's what he said. Yeah. See, I don't have a problem with nationalism because all
Right.
they put your nation first. I'm like, well, why wouldn't I? So
Right.
he said, we have no power. So if you don't have power, you're like a child. Children don't have any power in the household. They got to do what they're told.
Right.
They have no control over their food. They can't get themselves from one place to another. We're
So
infantilized.
you would agree that by adopting a political disposition towards school choice, then that is actually empowering black people. I mean, because I definitely would agree with you, but I've never heard of well, you don't hear too many, especially black folks, and let me ask you this question: why do you think that, or how is it, or what do you believe is, I mean, I probably know your answer already, but yeah, I still want you to go ahead and answer it for me. What do you believe is keeping black people away from the understanding of how school choice is empowering as opposed to continuing the I guess the model that is failing us at the moment?
I think that we consume a lot of other people's narratives
Mhm.
without examining details for ourselves. And that's what I had to admit I was doing. So I go into Planned Parenthood and I just absorb their narrative. I go into unions and I just absorb their narratives. I go into the ACLU and I absorb their narrative. So I have to take responsibility that I was not applying my own, like I have an ability to challenge things, but I wasn't applying it across the board. So we have to do the same thing. It's going to have to start with us taking personal responsibility. We have a huge narrative right now of others that should be doing things for you. That is false. And even if I was going to do something for you, I'm not going to do it as well as I do it for myself. I'm not going to be as invested as I am for myself. So you're always going to get less. If you want something done right, do it yourself. If you want something done your way, do it yourself. Stop being a backseat driver. Don't tell me that you have a food desert. Grow your own food. Now who's stopping you? Nobody. Don't tell me that you have a food desert when you expect to have a big giant store like a big chain store. Now, if you've been to a lot of cities on the East Coast, and I had this conversation specifically about these food deserts, I don't even really believe they exist, to be honest with you. I think it's just a new mythology because I know a lot of people who live in very rural areas. They have to go 20 miles. My brother lives in a rural town. It's only about 2,500 people. You think they have a big chain grocery store? He's got to drive like 20 miles, 30 minutes to go to the
Right.
grocery store. But they don't say the whole of rural America is in food deserts. But these people live in very near farming communities. So you're going to have access to people who grow their own food. You live in a rural area, chances are you grow a little bit of your own food. So when you never had the big chain, supplying you, you rely more on yourself. But when you're used to somebody else supplying you, as soon as you don't have it, you expect them to do it. So for me, the foundation for everything is going to start with, well, why can't we do it? Now, as I said, I just have to throw this one thing else because I ended up looking this number up and it was staggering. In New York, because as I said, I was on the board in New York City, so I was in New York like regularly. In New York, they don't have those big chain stores. They have those little neighborhood markets they call bodegas. And I
Mm,
looked up that they have 6,000 in New York City. So why can't we just have little neighborhood markets? Nobody's stopping you.
right, right. It seems like now, you said a lot of things that relate to how people can be empowered themselves.
Hmm.
But you talked about, your what do you, I think, forgive me if I'm saying it incorrectly, the liberal conveyor belt, or
Hmm.
so what was, I mean, I know that, and you spoke about, your spiritual, it sounded like, you were describing a spiritual awakening. Um, but what were you so, or what would you say is the thing that really surprised you the most, when you came into, your I guess, your awakening about, the different contrasts between the two perceptions, like, what gives you the most, I guess, awareness, or things that irritates you the most, I guess, let me put it like that.
Well, if I tie it specifically to the position I'm holding with school choice, the most surprising thing was the numbers.
Mm,
I had never looked at the numbers. I had absorbed the same narratives. People that are listening right now are clinging to the same narratives I had. I guarantee you they could be driving around right now. They're hearing me and they're getting mad. They don't like what I'm saying. They don't like that I'm saying you can do it yourself. They don't like that I'm saying that stop blaming other people. And they don't know the numbers, just like I didn't know the numbers. So I'm going to give you some of the numbers. Here's the big number. The Black community has 85,000 churches that sit empty 90% of the time.
mm,
So once I started looking at these numbers, because I talked to the white conservative groups as well,
mm,
and I tell them, do you know that there's a minimum? This is the lowest number I found, 330,000 churches in America that sit empty 90% of the time. When I saw that number, now I can't drive around without noticing a church on every corner. So, everyone that hears this show, for the next week, I want you to just drive around and do your regular life, but start noticing if you're sitting at a stoplight on a random Tuesday afternoon and you see that church on the corner and you're going to see an empty parking lot. When you are sitting, going to the grocery store and you drive by that church next door on a Thursday, empty parking lot. Why is that building not being used? So let me tell you another number, the government schools. There's 99,000 government schools. So wait a minute, we have 330,000 buildings and they have 99,000 buildings? In what world can 330,000 not beat up 99,000?
right.
We have infrastructure. When you're in a war, the number one thing you have to take out for your enemy is infrastructure. It's not about taking out the men in the army. The first thing they do is they get a war room together. You see, that's called strategy. That's what we're missing. Strategy. You get your war room together. You put a map down and you start saying, where are their hospitals? I'm taking them out. Where are their train stations? I'm bombing them. Where are they building their munitions? I'm bombing them. Where are their bridges? I'm bombing them. They take out infrastructure. You have no movement if you don't have infrastructure. We have zero infrastructure in America. That's what I thought. Then I said, we have 85,000 churches. That's infrastructure. Let me show you another number. We have 7.7 million Black children in the failing schools.
Mm, mm.
7.7 million. Now we have 85,000 buildings. When we do that math, if we had activated each one of those buildings, that's 91 students per building. That's not overwhelming to have a school with 91 students, K through 12. That's barely one grade per year. So we have capacity. And now we have legislation. 34 states have passed school choice legislation. So now we have infrastructure with buildings. We have legislation. Legislation equals funding. Why wouldn't we put together a new model where we're not relying on other people? I call that new model HBCUs K through 12. We already have HBCUs. If we can build colleges, we can build kindergartens. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense to me.
So now all we have to do, we already have the highest level of agreement for regarding school choice. So when I get pushback, the assumptions, remember I said we accepted other people's narratives. We believe in other people's assumptions. So people say they're not going to let you go to their schools. And I say, I don't want to go to their schools. I want to build our own schools. And they say, oh, they won't give you a seat at the table. I don't want a seat at your table. I want to own the table. So now when you're complaining about jobs, well, we can hire ourselves if we have schools. Who's going to paint those schools? Who's
Right.
going to do the HVAC? Who's going to mow the lawns? These are economic engines that we are ignoring. So you see how now we're building a movement? It started out, you wanted to get literacy. Next thing you know, you have a whole job system. Who's hiring the teachers? Am I hiring somebody that disagrees with my values? No. So again, you have 85,000 buildings, 7.7 million students. That equals 91 students per school. We have funding coming in. Kansas City, Missouri passed school choice. Most people don't know that. The funding is $6,750 per student. You have a church. You get a school. I'm just going to give you 50 kids in your school. That's $337,500 for 50 kids.
Right.
Bet you're not bringing that in now.
Right. Right. Right.
So
Right.
we have a church that is dying because they can't bring in new members. Why? Because you're boring. You don't do anything. The church is supposed to be dynamic, okay? So you have no plan for the next generation. You open up a school, you're going to be attracting young parents. Those parents want to be partners in their kids' education. Right now, they got just like a prison in the schools. People are dropping their kids off at a prison, literally going through metal detectors.
Right.
That's horrible. So now you can have teachers who can sit with parents and come into agreement. The scripture says, can two walk together unless they be agreed? See, I didn't know any of these scriptures. I didn't know anything. Now I see things and I'm like, oh, wow, what does that mean? We have to come into agreement. Right now, we don't have agreement. We just have chaos. We keep trying to fix the chaos. I'm going to tell you, the Lord told me you don't have to fix the chaos. You have to manage the chaos. So remember in Exodus, he had chaos, remember? And
Right.
what did he say? I'm not going to take you guys into the promised land.
Right.
I'm going to take the younger generation.
Right.
But we don't have to take them into the promised land. We have to take the younger generation. So you drop your kids off, We're going to focus on STEM. We're going to focus on teaching marriage. We're going to focus on community policing. We're going to focus on math and literacy, whatever we can come into agreement with. And now they haven't made these mistakes, the 5-year olds. Like, I can't keep fixing people who've made every mistake in life. The 5-year-old hasn't been to prison. The 5-year-old doesn't have bad credit. The 5-year-old doesn't have 3 children. The 5-year-old doesn't have child support coming after them. The 5-year-old is just a clean slate. Let's start with the clean slate. Let's do better. Let's do it ourselves. And as I said, we're still building an economy.
So Miss Lisa, so you were saying with this with the school choice program enacted, right?
Mhm.
You would you would also want to see it sounds like uh, a more of an embrace of classical education, since you brought up STEM, or what type of curriculum would you suggest for, or would you like to see maybe that could, resolve the 82% failure rate, or do you just think that just the more schools period could resolve that that failure rate that you were talking about earlier?
Well, that's 2 levels. So the first level is the most general. In general, when you introduce new um, products into the marketplace, it makes the whole marketplace better. So we want to have more cars. What if we only had one car to buy? It probably wouldn't be good. But because we have so many options, it makes the whole marketplace better. So if we introduce more schools, it's going to put pressure in the marketplace, and everybody has to do better to compete for the students. So that's just in general. When we're specific about the Black community, I don't promote one size fits all because that's what we're leaving. So, certain areas, it may make sense. And I think this would really, 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 really work well for the Black community. I really believe we need to have a lot of single sex education. I really believe we need boys' schools with a lot of men teaching in the boys' schools because that's something we're missing at home. We're missing that at home way more than the white counterparts, way more than the Asian counterparts, way more than our Jewish counterparts, way more than the Hispanic counterparts. So I would put that on the buffet. So I look at it like when you walk into a buffet, there's lots of options on the buffet. Everybody doesn't have to eat the same thing. So I don't say this is the specific curriculum. That will work well. I think a lot of boys' schools will work well. I think a lot of girls' schools will work well. I think STEM might work well for a certain select group of students. I think trades really are stronger right now when you look at um, where the marketplace is going, the economic marketplace. Trades are where we need to be in the next 10 years because America's infrastructure is failing and we don't have enough people who know the trades. They don't know welding, they don't know concrete work, they don't know housing framing. So we really.
Oh, yes.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yeah, we're back.
Oh God.
I just paused
Okay.
it.
Sorry, people. Okay,
Nah.
we were talking about the marketplace.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like I said, I want to build a buffet. It's not one size fits all. If you're vegan, if you eat meat, if you whatever you eat, it should be the parents and the teachers and that church that sit down. Now it doesn't have to be only churches. Um, so I'm going to talk about some of the pushback that I get because I've been talking about this for a couple of years,
Yeah, please
and
do.
I get weird pushback, and my pushback was coming from the Christian white evangelicals. So I sort of snap on them because they're letting their enemy educate their children. And I'm like, you're stupid. Um, okay, so the buffet, does that make sense? That it's not one
No,
size fits all? Okay,
no,
so what
yeah,
they're
it,
doing
it
in
it
Philadelphia,
does make sense.
we don't have, right. So right now we have a one size fits all Washington, D.C. Department of Education. pushes out this information, pushes out these instructions. What did I say? The government relies on force. So they've used force to make people in Montana do the same thing as the person in New York City, do the same thing as the person in Los Angeles. And there's completely different marketplaces and completely different needs. So we want to be local because the original school systems were like Little House on the Prairie. They were local and they had their little one room schoolhouse. Now, where was the school in Little House on the Prairie? What building was it in?
It was in a church.
Right. And 100% of the original education models were in churches in America, 100%. So we've moved away from moral instruction. Now, I'm not here to dictate people's morality, but I am here to be clear on mine. So on my morality, my experience that happened to me drove me in a certain direction. But I do not believe in force. So if you have a mosque and I'm telling you, you still got illiteracy rates. So you need to get the children that attend your institution and tap into that $6,750 because I want everybody's kids to learn how to read, even if we don't have the same, um, foundation or philosophy of life. You think I don't want your kids to learn how to read? This is good for America. So again, I said I don't have a problem with nationalism. I want nationalism. If you tell me I'm starting a school and guess what, we're teaching kids about gun safety, I'm like, well, fantastic. If you tell me I'm starting a school and it's an all boys school and we're teaching STEM or we're teaching military discipline, fantastic. There's really no downside to this movement except if you got an 82% not on grade level rate, that you're bad. You got to go.
So, and would you say that or let me ask you this: you because you talked about you said white Christians are sometimes give you the most pushback. What would you see, or what has been your experience as far as um the different challenges of getting the policies in places where school choice is not available? What are some of the difficulties in trying to get that policy enacted where school choice isn't um, available at the moment?
I mean, it's money. Most things are coming down to money. So, as I said, that marketplace where that guy has a 90% share in his grocery store business or his restaurant business, the government uses force to tie people to his business. He has money that he has controlled for a long time. He's going to take that money and leverage it against disruption. So let's go back to some market principles. Again, I always like to start with a big general principle and then bring people down to the specifics. So I'm going to give you a little quiz. And the people who are listening to you, I want them to answer the quiz. It's only 3 questions. You just give me the answer, whatever you think it is. Duran, what's the number one hotel chain in the world?
Hilton.
Hilton. Duran, what's the number one movie chain in the world?
Warner Brothers.
Duran, what's the number one taxi company in the world?
The United States of America. Oh, you
Taxi.
said taxi.
Mhm.
Oh, Uber.
Okay. So
I'm
you
sorry, I
got
thought you
one
said
right.
taxes. I thought you was
Taxi. No, we hate those. You got one right. Most people get zero right. So number one hotel chain, most people say something like Hilton or Marriott, which you did. But that is now Airbnb.
Oh wow.
The number one movie chain. People say something similar. They'll say AMC, Dickinson, but that is now Netflix.
Mm.
Taxi People used to say yellow cab, but those don't really exist anymore
Right,
because
right.
now it's been replaced with Uber. So Uber, Netflix, and Airbnb have one thing in common. They're what's called disruptors. They disrupted the hotel industry.
Mm,
Airbnb disrupted the hotel industry. Uber disrupted the taxi cab industry. And Netflix disrupted cable and the movie chains. There's a certain thing about disruptors. They never come from the inside.
mm.
Hilton would never have created Airbnb. They can't have that type of vision. Yellow Cab was never going to create Uber, and AMC Movies was never going to create Netflix. Disruption comes from the outside. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so now when we bring this down to our specific school choice example, government schools are never going to create this micro school movement that I'm talking about because they lose money and they lose power, they lose control. So it doesn't matter if I say to them, you got 82% kids not on grade level. I can show you a school in your same city, a school that's, in the same area with the same demographics. A little private school. I have that exact example because my friends send their kids to these little Catholic schools.
Mm.
They're operating on half of your budget and they got 90, 80% literacy. Really 100, because when you're writing those private school checks, your kid's gonna learn.
Right, right.
So I'm going to you and saying, Duran, yours isn't working. You're not disagreeing, right? You see, these are your test scores. But then I'll say, and you're spending double the amount. Why don't you send the kids over here? They're not going to say yes. So that means they don't care. They're just going to keep saying, just keep working with me. But guess what? Your kid only gets one chance at fourth grade. You
Mm,
can't keep doing these do-overs.
mm,
So we now have graduated a generation, a minimum of a generation, because I found out in the bigger cities outside of the Midwest, this has been going on for 2 generations.
mm.
So if you're listening to me, if some of this is resonating with you, I want you to go on YouTube and I want you to put in Project Baltimore Schools. There's a newscast in Baltimore, Maryland, where they track the government schools. I'm actually shocked that this is a newscast and they've been doing it for years. They have tons of content. They came out within the last year with the data that the bottom 30 schools in Baltimore, so this must be a big district, bigger than what we have. So
Mm.
the bottom 30 schools have zero children on grade level.
Wow.
Zero. Out of 30 schools, you can't get one kid on grade level.
Wow.
Baltimore spends about $25,000 per child. So if I gave you $250,000 and said, Duran, this $250,000 is only for you to educate your child, you don't think he should know how to read by the time you spent that $250,000? I come
Wow.
back to you at 13 years later and I say, okay, I want him to stand in front of me and I'm going to quiz him. And he doesn't know anything. He can't even read. He can't even do math. And I gave you $250,000 and you tell me just keep working with me.
Wow.
No, that doesn't make any sense. And at this point, there are people who you are dropping your child off with. This is my saying because I need people to get this. I need it to be visceral. Your child's teacher will crawl naked over broken glass for 1 mile to lock your kid in that school. That's who you're dropping your child off with every day. She will fight and lobby to make sure your child stays in the model that's not working for him.
Wow.
That is this your ally?
Wow.
This
Wow.
is your ally, but you're coming at me because I'm telling you the truth. Okay? So let me give you another parallel because I'm telling you, I work with the Lord and he helps me. I didn't know the Lord could give you slogans and marketing, but apparently he does. He could do the same.
Amen.
So you're telling me this is a parallel, and I don't know which one works for which people, so I try and throw a lot of them out there. Imagine you're in a burning building. We can imagine what burning buildings, we've seen them on TV. You're in a
Yep.
burning building.
Burning building, flames everywhere.
The fire department pulls up and they tell you, I need you to stay in there while we're putting the fire out. So that's what they're telling you to do when they say
Right,
keep working with us.
right.
No one should have to stay in the building while they put the fire out. That's what it's like for them to say, keep working with us. You
Wow.
should not be asked that telling me to stay in a failing school while you fix the system is like the fire department saying stay in the building while we put the fire out. The first thing the fire department has to do is get the people out. We have to get these children out. I don't believe they can fix this model. I believe that it's run its course. We're in a new era. Okay? So, the first government school in America, you see how much research the Lord makes me do?
Right. Hey, amen.
First
I like it.
school is called Boston Latin, founded in 1635. Benjamin Franklin went to that school. That school is still in operation. It's a great school,
You mean
but there was
1735?
no. It was already 100 years old by the time Ben went.
Oh, oh, Lord have
But
mercy.
it started in
Good God.
1635.
1635, Boston
Right.
Latin.
So this school is running up on 400 years. And this was just a model in the 1600s. Now we weren't even America. We were technically just a British colony.
Right.
And that was considered revolutionary at the time because didn't exist. They didn't really have where you would send your child somewhere to be educated. But the model is over. That's the only thing I'm saying. When you imagine the first telephone. So I'm going to go into another teaching right now. I call this teaching Embrace the Marketplace. That's all I'm asking people to do. So now I want you to think in your head. The first telephone. Most people have seen that image of Alexander Graham's first telephone. So now I want you to take your phone out, the phone you have in your pocket. It doesn't look like the phone Alexander Graham Bell had. It doesn't even look like the phone your grandmother had because that one was attached to the wall. Some of them were dial phones. Why does the phone look so different than the original phone? Because they embrace the marketplace. The marketplace will always give you rapid improvement. Now, most people have seen the first airplane. Now, that plane only flew for, I know it was like under 15 seconds that it was in the air. I look at that plane and I think they didn't even have a top over them. How am I up in the air with no top over me? But okay. Now imagine the planes that you get on when you go somewhere. It doesn't look anything like the first one because they embrace the marketplace. The aerospace industry embraced the marketplace. The telecom industry embraced the marketplace. Now, most people have not seen the first television. I have a picture of it when I do a presentation. I can pull up the first television. It only had a 3-inch screen.
Mm.
The image was just like a blob, a blur. But now look at, we're on our computers and using them like televisions. Now you can go to New York and see televisions that cover the whole side of a building. But the television industry embraced the marketplace. Now, that first school, guess what? These schools still look the same. They
Right.
had somebody standing in front of them with a blackboard with some chalk, with the kids sitting in a desk being given information they were supposed to memorize. Almost 400 years later, schools look the same. Guess what? They were off for the summer. Why?
Had to go to work.
No, they were farmers.
That's what I mean, working the
Yeah,
farm.
they had to farm. So we were on what was called the farm system.
Right.
Why are we still on the farm system
Right.
with kids being off all summer
Right.
and having all that learning loss?
Right.
Because we didn't embrace the marketplace. So we're not we're done with that model. It worked well. It got us where we are today. We're the number one economy in the world, but we're running on fumes. We have to make a new marketplace. So we just bury the old one, just like we buried the old telephone. Nobody was crying about it because we got something better. And we're just going to have to build a new marketplace. So we're going to embrace the marketplace. We're going to get something better. We're going to have a buffet where we're going to have different options. So if your child is supposed to have had ADD, which I don't believe in all of that, guarantee you once you start building, you're more likely to have ADD. I believe little boys are more likely to have ADD when they're sitting in all girls schools or being dominated by women.
Right.
When you put your little boy, for example, I have a cousin who's military. If he ran a school, they wouldn't have any ADD.
Right.
It wouldn't
Right.
exist. His
Right.
answer would be, "Drop down, give me 20.
Right.
You
Right.
ain't work out
Right.
this ADD. Okay, climb that rope." So I just think they need to build schools where the little boy is so exhausted by the time he gets home, he don't have ADD.
Right. Right. Hey, Miss Lisa, I have really appreciated the conversation today, and I don't want to keep you forever. So, um, let me just ask you what, okay, because you've given, man, you've given me, you've given us, everybody who listens to this a lot. And you even gave them, some initial first steps, and even very, very profound things to think about. So this definitely won't be our last conversation, but what would you just want to, kind of cap it off with now, and basically until next time, if I can get you on to, to do this with me again next time.
Okay, so I want to give you two pieces. The first one is, me and you, we talk about politics a lot because that's just sort of a little passion that we have.
Yeah.
But most people don't care that much about it. They don't. They don't see how it relates to them. And I feel like it relates to you. It's impacting you every day. You just don't know it. But
Woo, say that one more time.
politics is impacting you every day. You just
Every
don't
day.
know it.
Just don't
So,
know it.
and the reason you don't know it is they don't want you to know it. They want you to just
Exactly.
be on a conveyor belt
Say that one too.
and you're on automatic pilot. So if you're on a good conveyor belt, okay, you might live and die. But the
Right.
people who are struggling every day, you're being impacted every day.
Right.
But I don't put all my investment in a political party. I think people need to vote what impacts them. So my slogan for 2024 is I vote school choice. So
Right
if
on.
you support school choice, that's who I'm voting for because that means you're voting yourself. You're voting for your child. You're voting to own this education um, economy. So look at education like an economy. I'll give you some numbers. And I believe this is Kansas City in general, both sides of the state line. The numbers are this is the minimum. Just K through 12 education is about $250 million going into that economy every year. $250 million. Black people are not getting that money.
Mm.
You're not getting a contract to put in the HVAC. We're not getting a contract to mow the lawns. We're not getting a contract to paint the buildings. We're not getting a contract to build the desks. So I tell people, walk with me. Let's just walk with me in your head. Everybody knows what a school looks like. Okay. So let's get in our car, drive down the street, and pull up to the school you went to, your high school. Imagine that building. Now park your car in that parking lot. We didn't pave that parking lot.
Right.
Now walk up the stairs, probably concrete. We didn't do that. We didn't do that concrete work. Now open the doors. We don't own the company that manufactured those doors. Now open the door and walk in. You see like a row of lockers. We didn't build those lockers. Now go into one of the classrooms. We didn't build those desks. Now look at the chalkboard. We didn't have a contract. We don't own the company that manufactured those chalkboards. Now go into the cafeteria and you see all those tables and chairs. We don't own the company that manufactured those tables and chairs. Maybe somebody that looks like you works in there cooking some of the food, but they're not even cooking
Mm,
the food anymore. They're sending that from some nasty little place with a lot of processed food.
mm.
We don't have the contract to put in the HVAC systems. You're not putting on the roof. Why are you so committed to this system that's not investing in you? But when I make the parallel model and say, well, we have 85,000 buildings, now you can get the contract to paint the building. You can get the contract to mow the lawn. You can get the contract to install the HVAC, to put on the roof. We can have the ladies in the community that are saying we're going to come in and cook for the kids. We can say every little church. Why doesn't every little church have their own little mini urban garden? Why aren't we growing fresh fruits and vegetables for these children? Why don't we could make uniforms. So we now have an economy that will work for us. And the purpose of building economies is to be able to hire people, hire your own people. Now, I did not know any of this. As I said, I was on the liberal conveyor belt. But as I learned it and it started to make sense to me, and I started talking to other people, I hope it starts making sense to them. So if you're trying to build wealth and talk about a wealth gap, this is a tool to address the wealth gap. So now this one tool, school choice, is turned into an economy. It's turned in a way for us to have better food systems. It's turned into a way for us to teach financial literacy, which we're not getting. It's turned into a way for us to teach literacy in general, which is the goal. It's turned into a way for us to teach morality, which our children are not getting, and that's why we're suffering from a lot of this violence. It's turned into a way for us to teach how to have better relationships. It's turned into a way for us to teach marriage. It's turned into a way we can talk about parenting skills. It's turned into a way for us to teach people how to build businesses for the next generation. So, this one little change can address so many negatives, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I have Black people telling me, oh, well, we didn't learn about Black Wall Street. Well, okay, now this has turned into a way for us to teach about Black Wall Street. So, if we take control of our children's education, we can take control of the future. Or you can keep doing what you're already doing, which isn't working.
Right.
Okay. So I vote school choice. That's the only thing. Don't worry about who the candidate is. Don't worry about his party. You just ask him, do you support school choice? That tells you everything you need to know. If they don't support school choice, as far as I'm concerned, that's 21st century anti-literacy laws. We still have anti-literacy laws on the books. They
Mm.
pretended that they erased them. But if they don't support school choice, why can't the parent decide where they want their child to go? If somebody is against you, I'm going to tell you, they're a racist. You're
Right.
like, no, you better, they suspect, okay?
Right on.
I'm gonna leave you with my little slogan.
Yes, ma'am.
Black lives won't matter until black minds matter.
Amen.
Black lives
Black
will
lives
not
won't
matter
matter.
until black
Black
minds
lives
matter.
matter.
So our
Amen.
movement is Black Minds Matter. Okay. Okay.
Black minds matter. Right
Black
on.
Black
Right on.
Minds Matter. And actually, I'm going to give a shout out to one of my friends. She has a website, Black Minds Matter. She has a directory of all Black owned schools in America. So
Wow.
we don't realize that we have a history of owning schools. I didn't know that. But Black people had started owning and controlling education before the government came in and started building, our one size fits all model. So we're just
Wow.
gonna go back,
Man,
look up the Rosenwald schools.
the
I recently,
Rosenwald schools.
yes, this was a Jewish man actually who was financing Booker T. Washington. And they started over 5,000 schools all around the South. Little schools, some of them were for adults to teach adult literacy, but there
Right.
were 5,000 schools financed by Julius Rosenwald working with Booker T. Washington to expand education. So I'm thinking Booker T. Washington did Tuskegee and that was it. That
Right.
man, now he came out of slavery,
Right.
an
Right.
actual slave.
An actual slave. Right.
And he built the number one academic institution in America.
Yeah.
So I got to share one more thing. I got to
Go
share
ahead.
one more.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So as I'm doing this research, of course, I'm gonna come up on Tuskegee and what they were able to accomplish in under Booker T. Washington's control. And I actually one day I'm so curious about something. I called Tuskegee and I'm
Mm,
trying to find the entrance exams.
mm.
I actually found an exam from 1895. I think I sent that to you. I don't know if you got to look at that, but if I didn't, I'll send it to you.
No,
So
no, please do. Yeah.
okay, so I found now school used to only go to 8th grade. Most people don't know that. In America, school went to 8th grade. You got
Mm.
enough that you needed to know by 8th grade. So at one point, I found this exam that you needed to take to graduate from the 8th grade. I was blown away. I couldn't answer one question. So embarrassing. But guess what?
Wow.
You can't answer one either. I
Oh,
can
no,
answer.
no, 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 no.
No,
I'm
no,
not
I'm
laughing at you. I'm
telling
not
your
I'm
audience.
no, no, no.
No,
I
no,
was no,
I'm
I was right.
telling your
I was
audience.
laughing because they all because it's just far too often all I hear or I come across young people who they think that they have an idea of black folks in education, and I try to tell them because of the work that I've been exposed to through Thomas Sowell, that demonstrates that even when those schools didn't have, forgive my language, a pot to pee in and a window to throw it out, they
Mhm.
were producing some incredible scholars in their time. I mean, like, at bare minimum, they weren't off 90% from their grade level, so the reason why I just laugh, because yeah, I do not doubt for 1 second that entrance exam was probably just as rigorous, if not more rigorous, than anything that we're exposed to today. So that's really
It
why
it was embarrassing.
and I'm pretty sure I probably can answer one question either. Yeah.
No, you can answer half. I can answer half of one question. But this was the exam you needed to graduate from 8th
Eighth
grade.
grade. Wow.
And this happened to be in Salina, Kansas. But
Mm,
they were similar across the country. It's not like you had to be super brilliant to live
right.
in Salina, Kansas in
Right.
1895.
Right.
So two things jumped out at me. So I know the Lord guided me to this exam, and I'm looking at it, and the Lord is like, "You're missing something." He's like, "Look at the date," and I'm looking 1895, and he's like,
Mm,
and I'm like, "Oh wait, that's
mm,
30 years after slavery."
right.
So even the black kids who would have been the children of the slaves would have had to
Right.
graduate knowing the same information.
Right.
Okay, that's startling.
Right.
If you look at the exam, you're going to be startled. Next thing you know, I wonder, well, what kind of exams did they have to take to get into colleges like Tuskegee? So I start searching and I can't find it. I call Tuskegee. They bounce me around from department to department to department to department. And at one point, someone says, "You know what? We have a historian on staff." They transferred me to the historian. You could tell he don't get a lot of calls. He was very excited to talk.
Right.
And I'm like, so I'm asking so many questions. He's so excited to share all this information. And I tell him, I'm looking for the entrance exams. Were there entrance exams to get into Tuskegee? And he said, we don't have the paperwork. It was taken in the 1940s by the Smithsonian. So they have a permanent collection for Booker T. Washington. Go look there. I jump on their website. I can't find it. I call the Smithsonian. I wonder if they get a lot of calls. They're very friendly. They're telling me, "Oh, yes, we have all the documents. We're putting them all digital. This is how you find them." I start pouring through the documents. I'm like, this man was meticulous. Okay. They have receipts from him taking a train ride from A to B. And they
Right.
have every piece
Right.
of paper this man touched. So when I'm looking at these exams, looking for the exams, I find something else completely different, and it's documents from the 25th anniversary of Tuskegee. So 25 years after the founding, they have a big party, a big event, and the keynote speaker is the president of Harvard. The,
Wow.
the president of Harvard, he left
Wow.
Cambridge, Massachusetts. They didn't
Right.
have planes. He got on a train to
Right.
leave Cambridge to go down to Tuskegee, Alabama to
Right.
speak at Tuskegee. Wow, see, they really give us this certain image of the past, and it's just not accurate. Everybody wasn't running around being racist and being separated from each other,
Right.
because you certainly wouldn't think the president of Harvard would be going to Tuskegee.
Right.
He's the keynote speaker. Well, guess what I find? His speech. And he says a line in the speech, and I'm like, what? And he says, Tuskegee Institute has produced more self made millionaires
There we go.
than Harvard, Yale, and Princeton combined.
There we go.
I'm I'm
There we go.
gobsmacked. I'm like, who? What? Who are
Yes.
these people?
Yes.
So
Yes.
you're telling me Tuskegee in 1900, the event was 1905 or '06, that Tuskegee produced more black millionaires, self-made millionaires, because they weren't
Exactly.
inheriting it,
Right.
than he said combined, Harvard, Yale, Princeton combined.
Wow.
So that's the power of us educating ourselves. Now,
Wow.
again, I'm not promoting segregation, because that's one of the pushbacks I get.
Right.
And then I have to give people definitions. So the definition of segregation, what did I say? The government only has one tool: force.
Right. Right.
Segregation is a system designed by government where they use
Right.
force to tell people where they have to be.
Right.
That's against the law. But there's another concept, and it's protected by the Constitution, and that's called freedom of association. So people have a constitutional right to associate with whomever they want to associate. So because I'm not the government, nor am I promoting government education, there's no way I could be promoting segregation. So they
Right.
need to let that sink in. When I say we need to educate our own children, I'm not using force, because I don't have the power to use force. I don't have an army and I don't have a police. But if people want to, now I went to an integrated school and did very well. And I thought that should work for everybody. But guess what? I'm still wrong, because whatever you think should work for you is what you should be able to put together.
Right.
So if I drive by tomorrow, the Jewish school, there's a big Jewish school in Johnson County. Nobody ever goes over there and says they're promoting segregation.
Right.
If
Very
I
interesting.
drive by a Catholic school, of which there are thousands and thousands,
Right.
nobody ever goes and knocks on the door and say, well, you're promoting segregation of Catholics away from everybody else. No, they have a right to freedom of association.
Right.
So if I drive by, there's an all-girls school in Kansas City. Nobody ever says I'm promoting segregation. So if people decide to freely associate and build a school, that's great. If people decide to build a school that's integrated, that's why I say I don't tell you what's on the buffet. I tell you that a buffet is going to make the best marketplace over time. So if we want to deal with the wealth gap, if we want to deal with the education gap, if we want to deal with the crime, if we want to deal with whether or not we own or control any institutions, you want to deal with whether or not you're learning to read, write, and do math, you want to fix these problems, we have school choice is the best platform for you to get on board with, start building our own schools. I want 85,000 churches to have a one-room schoolhouse, even if they only have 50 children. It's going to make a difference.
Man, that is beautiful. That is really beautiful. That's definitely something to look forward to, and work towards. Man, Miss Watson, I appreciate you again. Go ahead and shut this down, and I look forward to us doing this again soon, because I think people gonna really get a lot from it, and I think it's really gonna have well, we'll see where it goes, but we'll definitely keep snowballing. So thank you.
Okay. Thank
All
you so
right.
much, Ron. I really appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you as well.